I'm Isabella. I'm a third year PhD student at Caltech. I'm working in numerical relativity, so I'm a physicist. I graduated from Columbia University in 2022, and I have been working with Professor Tucholsky ever since. I essentially study black holes from a more theoretical perspective. So we run and analyze simulations to learn more about the theory of general relativity, which is Einstein's theory of gravity.
Wow, that's really impressive.
Thank you.
And then how did you get interested in research in the first place?
I've been interested in research since I was in high school, although I didn't do research then just because, of opportunities. And I didn't know that there was so much that you could do even in high school, like especially when it comes, to coding. And nowadays everything is, can talk to people when be a member of research groups just, by having Zoom meetings with people, which is great. And we didn't have that back then. But I got involved with research mostly when I was in college. So I took my first year more, to explore things around and took classes and started doing research on my sophomore year. And I did condensed matter. And then my third and fourth year, I switched to high energy astrophysics. And now I'm doing general relativity.
Yeah, that's really cool. And then in terms understandable to a high schooler, could you give me an overview of your research?
Okay, so essentially, we have black holes in space, and sometimes black holes will collide, and that with event will release a lot of energy. We have signatures of those events through gravitational waves. So we have gravitational wave detectors. We have LIGO, for example, which became very famous around 10 years ago because of the detection. It's crazy to me that it's been 10 years. And those waves, they are described by Einstein. They're a prediction of Einstein's theory of relativity. So there is this theoretical aspect to them. The Einstein's equations are too complicated. So we solve them using a supercomputer. And we want to analyze those results to understand more physics about gravitational waves when we detect them. So that's essentially what I do. I'm trying to understand what is happening with black holes, but because it's too complicated with data, we look at theoretical predictions.
That's really
Yeah.
interesting. And then what were some of your most significant findings?
So after black holes collide, the horizon, so the shape of the black hole is very deformed, but that is not allowed by physics. So it decays into and becomes a stable, circular, very nice black hole like the one that you see in Interstellar by emitting gravitational waves. And then when we detect those gravitational waves here, in a very far region of space, we find that they correspond to damped sinusoids, which means that they can be characterized by some frequency. Recently, we published a paper showing that you could fit about like 40 harmonics in one of those simulations. And that gives us information about the dynamics of that merger and the final black hole. So I would say that so far that's been my most significant finding.
Yeah, that's so cool. And then what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced in research and how did you overcome those?
I think that asking the right questions, first of all, because there are so many things that you're going to be interested in doing research, but it's important to know, what can be understood, how much time things are going to take and what is interesting not only to you, but also, to the field because you want to contribute meaningfully and you want to advance the field. So it's about like reconciling these multiple interests and how I overcame them by talking to people. I think you can benefit a lot just, from talking to people.
And then kind of on the flip side, what do you enjoy most about your research?
I think it's really cool when you can connect the really hard mathematical expression that you're trying to understand to what's happening in the real world. And it's very satisfying when you cross that gap, between the math that you're trying to understand and actual physical predictions that you can observe.
And then which person or mentor in your field has made the biggest impact on you?
Okay, so I would say that Erin Kiera, she's a professor that I worked with in undergrad. She's currently a professor at MIT, and she was amazing. She is an amazing scientist. She's an amazing person, very inspiring.
And then were there any pivotal moments in your research career that made you change topics or want to pursue a certain topic?
Yeah, I think that when I started grad school, because my background was in high energy astrophysics, that That's what I did during undergrad. But then I realized I wanted to do something more, something that would be more closely connected to the more fundamental questions that I want to address. And those are more of like, what is quantum gravity and how can we understand quantum gravity? And I decided to switch and go from high energy astrophysics, which is more observational, to something that is very theoretical, which is general relativity.
And then where do you see your research field expanding to? So, like, what are some interesting topics that can be further explored within the next 5 to 10 years?
Definitely what is happening close to the merger and how well we can map space-time perturbations near the black hole and relate them to what can be measured at infinity by our detectors.
Okay. And then where did you start? I know that like you mentioned that you started research in college, but like what were some basic lab positions or internships that you like might have had?
Yeah, so I started just by reaching out to professors. They tend to be very open to young students. And what usually happens is they're going to pair you with an older grad student or with a postdoc who will work more closely with you. So literally just send cold emails to people.
What different institutions have you worked at and like how were those experiences?
Yeah, okay. So I worked at Columbia because that's where I did my undergrad. They were all very supportive. My first experience was in condensed matter. It was experimental. I didn't really like it. I worked in condensed matter for almost a year, and then I decided to switch to high energy astrophysics. And then I worked with Rashmi Mukherjee. She was also, very, very supportive. And then I also had a research experience at MIT with Erin Guerra, also on X-ray astrophysics. It was also really good. I'm still in touch with her, and I also built relationships during those experiences. I still talk to those people now. We are friends, even though we are doing different things. I also had an experience in Italy at Cagliari, which is southern Italy, and I was working also on experimental things, so experimental particle physics. That was also a really good experience, more international, and it's also good for you to foster international collaborations. And I also happened to run into my collaborator from Italy at APS, which is the annual physics meeting a couple weeks ago, and that was really fun. So all of that to say that all of those different experiences they matter and build relationships. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And then how did you find like your passion for physics and how would you suggest high schoolers try to find their own passions in research?
Well, I found my passion honestly like by watching documentaries and reading books. And I was just very fascinated by the things that I was learning and about the idea that you could learn more about the universe by doing math. And I guess like don't put too much pressure on yourself to know exactly what kind of research you want to do. Just do something. The path will show itself to you. Just do something, like I started doing condensed matter because I that was the opportunity that I had available at the time. Then I switched, twice, and that is fine, and I might switch again. Just follow your current interest.
Yeah, that's great advice. And then what kinds of skills could high schoolers develop, even if they don't have access to a lab or any like fancy technology like materials that you guys have?
Coding, you can just take online classes, learn how to code. That's super important. And if you know how to code, learn how to do literature review. And then you can come up with your own questions and you can even start, solving your questions if you know how to code, because many questions can be answered that way by analyzing data and things like that. So coding, data analysis, literature review. And you don't need anyone for that. Just Google.
Yeah, okay. And then what traits do you think define a great researcher in their field? And like what type of traits would you look for in like a potential lab member or like collaborator?
I think curiosity, work ethic, so they need to be trustworthy. Yeah, curiosity and work ethic.
And then like why are these traits so important to research?
Curiosity because that's what makes you ask good questions and go after them, because the path in research is not always straightforward. But when you are curious, you have that inner drive and that inner ambition to keep going and to figure things out. And it's also about like reading in between the lines to come up with something, to try to see things differently and try to come up with something, see things in a way that people haven't seen before. So that's why curiosity is so important. And work ethic because, you can be a genius, but, if you're lazy sitting on the couch, you're not going to accomplish anything. So, yeah, that's in my head like the power combination.
Yeah, okay. And then, like, just for a final question, what kind of tips would you give to a high schooler who's looking to go into your field? Because I know that like physics has a reputation for being really challenging.
Yeah, so first, I would say that there are so many things that you can do in physics. And there's definitely a lot that high school students can do, especially when it comes to analyzing data from observatories, from satellites and things like that. That is something that is so doable for high school students. So the only thing that you need to learn how to do is learn how to code and analyze data, which is, I'm not going to say it's like super easy, but it's very doable. And you can even publish a paper if you find something interesting. So yeah, so that's one thing, and reach out to professors from local universities because I'm pretty sure you're going to find someone that is willing to mentor you, and even grad students.
Okay, so that's all the questions that I have for today. And thank you so much for meeting with me again.